Thought I heard my Give the Lord a great big hand. Now, beloved, I'm going to call your prayerful attention to our lesson for this morning. But I could ask you to put your sermonic start line on verse number 6. Verse number 6, Jeremiah 18. We find these words. The Lord says to Jeremiah to go to the house of Israel, say to them, O house of Israel, can I not do with you as this potter does, declares the Lord, like clay in the hands of the potter, so are you in my hands. Now I want to use for our subject on this Union Sunday morning, subject, lessons from the potter's house. Lessons from the potter's house. Most of us know what it feels like to make a mess of things. I do not necessarily mean a complete mess. Thank God, very few people make a complete mess of their lives. However, some of us know full well that there are some things in our lives that we deeply regret in some way, in some shape, or in some form. Most of us wish that life had afforded us the chance and the opportunity to do some things differently. However, the opportunity to do things differently is not afforded to all of us. Consequently, many of us feel as if we have made a mess of things, and we are lamenting over our past because we wonder what our lives would have been like if we had been given the opportunity to do some things over. However, life is not as kind to all of us as it is to some. And as my mother would often remind us, sometimes you have to be careful how you make your bed. Or if you make your bed hard, sometimes you simply have to learn how to lie in it. Then there are others of us who feel as if we have messed up, not because life did not give us the chance to do some things over, but we feel as if we have messed up because when the opportunity to do some things came our way, we failed to take full advantage of them because we were caught up doing our own thing. Many of us have squandered, wasted, abused, and missed out on valuable opportunities that have come our way in life because we were not in a position to be blessed by God. For most of us, however, the feeling of having messed up comes not from missed or never afforded opportunities in life. These feelings are most often associated with having said and or having done things in an inappropriate or ill-advised manner. As many of us look back over the course of our lives, It is painfully apparent to us that we have made a mess out of things by saying and by doing things that in retrospect would have been better left unsaid and better left undone. We have said things and we wish to God that we could take them back. We have acted in ways and in manners that when we look back over the course of our lives, we acted irresponsibly, or we acted in haste, or we acted in the spur of the moment, or we simply acted out of sheer foolishness. No matter how we size it up, all of our lives are marred by things that have happened to us that were both seen and unseen, planned and unplanned, and anticipated or not anticipated. Such was the case with the people of Judah in our lesson for this morning. The people of God, as we meet them this morning, are lamenting over mistakes they have made individually and nationally. In short, the root cause of their problems, both individually and nationally, has come about because they allowed their position and their relationship with God to go to their head. And instead of seeing their relationship with God as one of responsibility, they saw it as one of solely being of privilege. They made a mess of things. But the good news of our lesson is that right in the midst of their mess, God speaks to them. Thank God that the God that we serve, thank God that the God of biblical faith is not a God who shies away from us because we have gotten ourselves in a mess. There are those of us, we have friends who will avoid us because we are in a mess. There are folk who will disown us because we are in a mess. But thank God that God still is with us, even when we are in a mess and even when we make a mess. In our lesson this morning, God invites the prophet Jeremiah to go down to the potter's house. And while at the potter's house, God reveals to us several fascinating aspects of life that serve to illustrate the fact that we can be marred by the experiences and the circumstances of our lives, but are nevertheless still very useful to God and for the divine purposes that God has for our lives. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm so glad this morning that when I made a mess of things, that God stood right there by my side. I know that there are those of us who feel as if you've never done anything, but you can go ahead and take a snooze and take a nap. I'm talking to those of us who know we have messed up. And in the midst of our mess, we desire to be blessed. That's a powerful message, powerful reminder that our lesson offers to us this morning. What a powerful reminder of us to be reassured of the fact that no matter what mess we are in, no matter how long we have been in a mess, no matter what kind of mess we have been through, what a powerful reminder of the fact that the God of biblical faith is a God who declares, I'm not through with you yet. The fact of the matter is, God is ready, God is willing, God is able to use us, God is able to deliver us, and God is able to save us from the messes we are going through and the messes that we have lived through in our faith? What lessons can we learn from the Potter's house that will make us better people? And what lessons can we learn from the Potter's house that will encourage our souls as we face the challenges of everyday life and everyday living? In the first place, one of the first things that we can discover from our lesson is the fact that the Potter's house should remind us of the fact that God has a plan and God has a purpose for our lives. And we need to remind ourselves of that, because the devil will tell us that you messed up so badly until it is over, it is done. You cannot be recovered, you cannot be restored. But I stop by to remind somebody that the devil is alive. From Jeremiah's visit to the Potter's house is that the Potter has a specific plan in mind for each and for every piece of clay that he attempts to shape. In our lesson, the prophet Jeremiah's heart and mind must have been preoccupied and consumed with the thoughts of the great mess that his people had made of their history. The nation of Israel had been given a rich and fertile land as their inheritance. They would live in homes that they had not built. They would reap food from farms they had not cultivated, and they would drink wine from vines they had not planted. But instead of utilizing and enjoying the land that God had given to them, they quarreled, they bickered, and they complained over it. God raised up prophets among them, men of vision who expressed purpose in life, was to show them God's ways and God's ways of peace. But instead of loving them and supporting them in their God-given ministries, they picked up stones and threw them at them. God had called their nation into existence in order to make them a shining example to all of the other nations of the world of what one nation would it, to reshape it, and to remold it into the image that the potter intended for it to be. And the good news is that God never throws us away, even when we break in his hands, even when the wheels of life are turning us, and we are going through storms and trials, tribulations, and hardships. I'm so glad that God never takes his hand off of us. Anytime we have a shame as a power, that the fires were breaking out and storms were raging. Thank God that God didn't take his hand off of us. They were never called, and I gotta fix it. But God didn't take his hands off of us. I lost my house and I lost my car, but I didn't lose my sanity. God would not take his hands. Relationships may break up and they may break down, but God is in the recreation business, and he can remake, remold, and recreate. Our children may go astray. They can get caught up in drugs. They can wander the streets at night. They can drop out of school. And they can even leave the church. But if we give them over to God, how do you know that God can break them? And God breaks them, not so that they might remain broken, but God breaks them so that he might remake them into the image that he has in mind. And any one of us may have felt the wrong way, done the wrong thing, or thought the wrong way, but thank God that God did not take his hands off of us. I wonder, is there a witness in the house who is not ashamed to say, I had a bad attitude and I had a bad disposition, I even had a bad temper, but how many know that a bad attitude and a bad disposition and a bad temper cannot deter God? It cannot make God afraid of us. It cannot frustrate God. God looked beyond our faults and saw our needs. Have I got a witness in the house this morning? Somebody that no matter what you're going through, no matter how long you've been going through it, no matter how long you've been in a mess, God is not through with you yet. And you ought to stand on your feet and start giving God thanks and giving him glory and giving him praise. I'm so glad that we can discover from our lesson. We not only discover from our lesson the fact that the potter's house should remind us that God has a plan and God has a purpose for our lives. But we can also discover from our lesson the fact that the potter's house should remind us to be careful not to blame God for our plight in life. One of the fascinating insights that we can learn from Jeremiah's trip to the potter's house is the fact that the clay is marred, but the way that it turns out cannot be blamed on the potter. rescue me out of lifeline. Thank God that God pulled me to save me. Lord God, that God gave me some things that the world couldn't give me. God gave me peace that surpasses all understanding. And so I can live more and be of good courage. I stop trying to help somebody. Don't play the blame game. Don't blame your way through. Praise your way through. Give him glory. Give him honor. To work with us, regardless as to what happens in our lives. God has better things than to sit around orchestrating situations in our lives in order to mess us up. The potter in our lesson does not expect to turn all of the lumps of clay in the very same or into the very same vessel. He is not frustrated because the clay has messed up. The potter continues to work the clay into another kind of vessel that, and listen to this, incorporates its flaws into the design of the new vessel. Somebody said, I thank God that I'm not where I used to be or who I used to be, but I thank God that God is still making me. In other words, I still have faults. I still have my failures. I still have my downfalls. But I thank God that every day He keeps right on blessing me. About God's grace. When God's grace met me, thank God that God wasn't looking for goody two shoes. That God wasn't looking for somebody that had never made any mistakes. God was not deterred by sometimes my attitude. God was not deterred by sometimes my disposition. God looked beyond my faults and He saw my needs. That I got a witness. Somebody give God some praise. Somebody give God some glory. Somebody about God's grace. God takes the prostitute. God takes the God takes the crackhead. God takes the heroin user. God takes the drug dealer. God takes the whoremonger. God takes the adulterer. God takes the self-righteous. God takes the bigot. God takes the racist. And although they although God never intended for her or him to succumb to this kind of lifestyle, but because God is sovereign, God still gives us a story to tell, and God still gives us a testimony. That's why it's so good for us not to gloat in our past, but take your past and use it as your testimony. Tell somebody that I don't look like I've always been. Tell somebody that I'm not proud of some of the things that I've done, but what I'm proud about is God's amazing grace. go and to say to the house of Israel, to remind the house of Israel, if you will, to preach to the house of Israel, like clay in the hand of the potter, so are you in my hands. In other words, no matter what we have been through, no matter what we are going through, no matter what we are up against, I'm so glad that God has a word for us. As a matter of fact, God has a word with your name on it. I don't know about anybody else. I don't know why you came here this morning. I came here for more than